If you perform well, you're loved. And if you don't, you're not loved. You don't learn just the positive aspects of your parents. You learn the negative aspects. My father just flew into rage. He would just yell, "What the fuck do you want?" You can see how much it still affects me.
Your parents breaking up at 2 years old. Was that significant for you in hindsight? As you look back as an adult, is that a significant moment?
The ramifications of that were incredibly significant because it brought in my stepmother and my stepfather into the constellation of my family. So there could be very few things that were more significant than that, as I had 4 models of parent rather than 2. And with 4, I was able to get a much more well-rounded approach. Like the difference between my father and my stepfather were immense.
What were those differences?
Well, my father was an incredibly acute and attuned intellectual, a philosopher, a thinker. He was able to actually analyze, a logician. He was able to analyze the world in this very kind of philosophical way, and it helped shape my mind in that way. My stepfather brought that bear energy of what it is to be a man, the physicality. He was always the best to play with as a kid too, because of course you want to play with the bear. They know how to roll around and laugh and tell stories, and you sit on their shoulders and you go climbing around. And it's not that both parents didn't have a little bit of that, but they were very different archetypes. And so my understanding about what it means to be a man included so many different things. It included the eloquence of being able to write poetry and solve problems and play Scrabble and play chess. And it involved also brute force wrestling and playing and telling stories and standing as a hero against that which didn't serve, and so with 2 models of father, I got to actually have a much more well-rounded kind of idea of what it meant to be a man.
Was there lessons that you had to unlearn from that?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you don't learn just the positive aspects of your parents. You learn the negative aspects of your parents too. Those are learned in ways that your mind can't even comprehend. So things that my dad was stressed about, I find myself being stressed about because it transmitted this kind of general sense of worry about things. So I've had to unlearn those aspects of worry. My father also, want to fly into fits of rage at a certain point. I remember one time, this is a very very important story in my own trajectory. Because my father, when he would get angry, he would just yell, just like he would just erupt. And it was early after I started on it. It was probably 2013, 2014. And we had a smaller office then, not the smallest office. It was the second biggest office that we had. And I had my own office, and I was in there and I was filming a video, and it was an important video for me to film. And we had a kind of front desk customer service person also in the office who was handling emails, customer service things, and also handling anybody coming in the door. Something came up where she started knocking on the door. Well, I didn't know it was her that was knocking on the door. I didn't really know who was knocking on the door. I was just trying to film a video. And back then we didn't have a bunch of video editors, so it wasn't like we weren't able to just stop. I had to kind of hit it in one take. We didn't have the tech resources then. So I'm like 5 minutes into this take, I'm killing it. And the knock comes, and then a second knock, and then a third knock. And finally by the third knock, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was throwing me off my mental track. And I just started yelling like, what is it? What the fuck do you want? Like one of those moments where I just got really angry. And then I hear like, "I'm sorry." And I was like, oh man, that was our front desk girl. It was just a sweetheart, like absolute sweetheart, like the sweetest. And I like take a deep breath, and I like open the door, and I walk out there, and she's crying in her desk. In that moment, I realized like, I'm not going to do that ever again. Like, I'm not going to do that shit. I'm not going to fly into a fit of rage and hurt somebody. I won't. And you can see how much it still affects me, because that was the point that pattern broke for me. And it's not that I haven't gotten mad since then or whatever, but never like that, and there's something else in me. It's like, no, never again, because I saw her and I saw what I did. And of course I apologized. But that's where I stopped that lineage transmission and said, it stops with me.
Where did that lineal transmission start in your father? Did you ever figure that out?
Yeah, with his father. I don't know how far it went back. I don't have a strong genealogical tree. I didn't even get to meet either of my grandfathers, actually, but I've heard the stories. I heard the stories of that. My dad did the best to kind of shed as much of the trauma that he could shed, so he would pass on as little as possible to me. And he did his best. And he was actually the one that encouraged me to go on my own psychedelic medicine journey, because that was one of the tools that he used to try and actually change who he is so that he could be better for me and be better for the world. And he did a great job. Compared to the stories of my grandfather, to him, he did an amazing job. And it was my job to clean up the rest. And that's what I'm in the process of doing, is cleaning up the rest, so that when I have my son, Huxley is going to be his name, of course, source willing that we have a child. I don't want to pass any of that on. I just want to pass the legacy, a new, fresh legacy, like fresh powder on a mountain, like fresh tracks, a legacy of love, a legacy of support, a legacy of like, I'm here, son. And also, you're so much more powerful than you think you are. And let me show you, and bring him through all of the initiations, the sweat lodges, the cold mountains like I've climbed with Wim Hof, when he's old enough, the medicine journeys, bring him through this path of initiation, but the whole way, just love, love, love the whole way, where that never wavers. So he's not trying to prove something to me so that he can get me to love him. He knows that I love him.
Are you speaking about a younger version of yourself and your father when you say that about that approval?
Of course.
Have you got an example of when you realized that you were following that pattern?
The example's most of my whole life, right? Like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right, Dad? Am I doing it good enough, Dad? It was the subconscious dialogue that I've been in for a long time. Now, it was my father first, so that my father was Dad. So my Michael Marcus represented that image of Dad, but it would transfer to other people. It could transfer to a mentor. It could transfer to a partner. It could transfer to a boss. And I would put this kind of approval seeking desire on them. They would be the surrogate father, and I would be trying to show them how good I am. And then they would love me. Just like when I scored 25 points in a basketball game, my dad was all fucking love and happy. And when I scored, 7 points and had a bad shooting night, it's not that he didn't love me, but it felt like he didn't love me, because he was just quiet and sullen, and I was quiet and sullen, and all of the love felt like it had been sucked out of the room like a vacuum, right? So I learned, and that's just one example of many different ways that I learned that if you perform well, you're loved, and if you don't, you're not loved.
What's this ping pong story?
Yeah. Well, that was just one of the moments that my father just flew into rage, So I was 4 years old, and my father was playing ping pong, and he hit a ball. It hit off the corner of the paddle, flew up into the stratosphere, basically, because he was trying to hit a smash. And I go, home run. I'm just a kid. And I thought that was a funny thing to say. But for my father, he was so locked in this intense competition, which of course didn't matter. He's not like in the ping pong world championships. It was in his house. And later he started yelling at me for saying that during his ping pong match, because it threw him off his game or whatever it was. So moments like that really made me kind of aware to the point of being scared about what I was saying. And so it gave me, and as I said before, like one of the Stoic mindsets is everything that happens to you happens for you. Why did it happen for you? I look at that story now and say, okay, at that moment, I realized that I have to be very mindful of everything I say when I say it, because there's drastic consequences if I don't. What does that make me do? It makes me a very good listener. It makes me a very good communicator. It allows me to understand how my words could be perceived. What a gift. That's my superpower. Thanks, Dad.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.